While walking down a street one day, Yamashita Kazuo notices a fight between two men, Tokita Ohma and Kamada, in a side alley. Yamashita expects Kamada, significantly larger and bigger, to utterly defeat Ohma. However, Ohma is so fast that he effortlessly dodges all of Kamada's attacks. When Kamada goads Ohma into attacking directly, he easily batters Kamada and dislocates his shoulder. When Kamada attempts to retaliate, Ohma finishes him off with several kicks to the face. Yamashita asks Ohma his name, he gives it to him and offers to fight, but Yamashita declines. Riled up by the encounter, Yamashita quickly heads to a brothel, to release his pent-up energy, something he has never done before. Watching that fight made him feel alive again. When he is once again scolded by his boss at Nogi Publications for being below the required quota, he is irritated and he wishes he could fight like Ohma in order to be treated with respect. They are interrupted by the arrival of the president of Nogi, who specifically asks after Yamashita. He is brought to him. There, he meets Nogi Hideki, the owner of Nogi Publications. He queries Yamashita on conflict resolution before launching into an explanation of Kengan Association's history of using violence to resolve conflicts arising between different enterprises, eventually resulting in one-on-one matches with each company choosing a fighter as represented. Yamashita, although initially disbelieving, is assigned by Nogi to be Ohma's caretaker, who Nogi just recently hired to replace their former fighter, Kamada, who has been earlier defeated by Ohma. On the street, Yamashita attempts to dissuade Ohma from fighting, considering it's an illegality, but he couldn't. At his home, Yamashita monologues about his life situation. He's 56 years old and has worked with Nogi Publications for 34 years, but his oldest son Yamashita Kenzo is 25 and never leaves his room. Yamashita hasn't seen his face for about 3 years now. His wife abandoned him 10 years ago, and the house he owns still has 15 years left to pay. Arriving at the abandoned mansion in the woods where Ohma live, Yamashita is shocked to find him covered in blood. Actually, the blood was from a boar that Ohma had killed, cooking it for food. While eating, two strangers enter the mansion, one being Iwan Karaev, a famous Russian kickboxer, who challenges Ohma in a fight. Ohma accepted without thinking twice. The fight begins, and as Iwan goes for a high kick, Ohma dodges and kicks Iwan in his exposed groin, bringing the Russian down. His companion moves forward and slashes Iwan's throat, leaving him to bleed out. He then introduces himself as Rihito, Ohma's opponent in the next Kengan match. At the match, the president of Yoshitake Real Estate, Yoshitake Yoshiro, is first encountered. He is the sponsor and the one who chooses Rihito to represent his company. Akiyama Kaede explains to Yamashita that the wager of the fight are some construction rights to a planned 100 billion tower. Nogi Hideki also explains to Yamashita that the people in attendance are the representatives of companies in the Kengan Association, and they are present to report the results and also bet on the fight. The crowd is initially upset that Kamada Shigeru is not present and is demanding a serious fight. Kaede questions Nogi's choice of Ohma as a fighter, considering he did not forewarn him about Rihito's skills. Nogi simply responds that if Ohma cannot win here, he will not be needed anymore. Ohma and Rihito warm up in the makeshift arena, and the fight begins. Neither combatant moves, however, continuing to stare at each other, shifting their weight and balance while looking for an opening as the crowd complains at the lack of action. Suddenly, they both move, Ohma landing the first punch but Rihito resisting the blow by pressing his head forward, robbing it of power. Ohma eventually gains the upper hand, and takes Rihito to the ground, but then, Rihito slices Ohma's arm and chest with his fingertips, that he claims are sharp as the edge of a razor. He gained this ability due to his preternatural pinching strength. The fight resumes, and Rihito scores several slices on Ohma nonetheless remaining calm despite losing a high quantity of blood. Rihito presses the advantage, and Ohma lands a stunning kick to Rihito, knocking him to the ground again, but this time Ohma does not advance. Rihito mocks him, saying he grabbed Ohma's leg as he kicked, and sliced him again. Rihito eventually reveals that he does not consider himself human, but a superhuman due to his inborn grip strength, and his fighting skills as well. Rihito tells Ohma his real name, Ichiro Nakata, having taken a pseudonym as superheroes in fiction. As Rihito continues to boast, Ohma mocks him, saying real heroes are a few words. He claims to have found a counter to Rihito ability. Rihito becomes unnerved. Yoshiro then screams to Rihito to take the finishing blow. As Rihito strikes, Ohma blocks him with an open-handed grip, having prevented Rihito from gaining acceleration enough to properly cut. Pressing the advantage, Ohma disrupts Rihito's flow of power and once again sends him to the ground, this time finishing with a foot kick to his face, winning in the process, with only a few professionals who really understood what had happened. Ohma, Yamashita, and Kaede celebrate with food. Kaede asks him what's the reason that push him to fight, as money isn't really worth the pain and potential death. He explained that he wants to establish who is the strongest between him and his opponent. Kaede questions why that would be enough reasoning, considering that he might die if he loses, to which he responds that there is no possibility of that happening, although Ohma thinks internally that he seeks to defeat an old acquaintance named Kiryu. In a university owned by the Koyo Academy, also member of the Kengan Association, Kiryu has defeated all of the participants of the Battle Royale held to choose the representative of the Academy group. Shion, chairwoman of Koyo, accepts him as fighter. Meanwhile, Nogi arranges a final fight test for Ohma against a 57-streak winner. Ohma prepares to fight the fighter representing the Gandai group, Tsukibayashi Jun, a large professional wrestler. The fight will be held in an underground parking lot. Ohma begins fighting immediately despite Tsukibayashi willing to talk first, but his blows have little effect due to Tsukibayashi's massive size. Jun eventually lands a devastating kick, sending Ohma into a car, before monologuing about how Ohma has the option to run or to dodge the attacks if he wants, whereas he has a duty to not dodge or run being a professional wrestler. He calls Ohma a peasant. Ohma then retaliates in earnest, seeming to gain the upper hand, until Tsukibayashi claims he was acting, and slams Ohma to the ground. Jun continues to pummel the unconscious Ohma. When a spectator claims that Ohma has lost, Yamashita Kazuo grabs his shirt and demands he takes it back, yelling that Ohma cannot lose. The onlooker on the other hand is unmoved. As Tsukibayashi is about to break Ohma, the latter finds himself in a room lit with candles. He then blows them out. Ohma suddenly awakens, having broken Tsukibayashi's fingers, and jumps aside, seemingly possessed. He begins fighting beyond his usual style, keeping up a continuous flurry of blows that Tsukibayashi continues to absorb as he advances. Tsukibayashi tries to grab Ohma, but he dodges and parries with a kick, sending Tsukibayashi staggering backward. Two newcomers to the fight, Wakatsuki Takeshi and Amai Cosmo, comment on the fact that Ohma has increased in power. But Tsukibayashi simply comes back, staggering him with two massive blows, until Ohma lunges forward to meet Tsukibayashi's oncoming rush, striking him in the windpipe, cutting off his supply of oxygen to his brain and defeating him. At the end of the match, the onlooker offers to have a drink with Yamashita. Suddenly, Kataara Metsudo, the chairman of Dainapon Bank and also the president of the Kengan Association, arrives and congrats Ohma for his win. Tsukibayashi returned to his feet, seemingly undamaged from the fight, and acknowledged that Ohma is a strong fighter. It appears that the reason behind that fight was to acquire Gandai's approval for Nogi's proposal to initiate a Kengan Association presidential promotion competition. And this would determine who would take the presidential seat of the association, with the CEO whose fighter would win, have the right to choose the next chairman of the association. Metsudo then declares open the death tournament, allowing every member of the association to participate and register their strongest fighter, whose background will not be questioned, whether being a boxer, martial artist or even murderer. Ohma become very excited, claiming that a particular person for whom he has been waiting for 10 years will eventually participate in this tournament. Some days later, in the building of the Nogi group, Ohma is strangling Hideki for not choosing him as the fighter that will represent the company in the Annihilation tournament. Hatsumi Sen then arrives, and introduces himself as being the representative of the Nogi's group in the tournament. He stops Ohma from strangling Nogi, then claims that Ohma is too weak and too injured to enter the tournament. Ohma unhappy attacks him but Sen effortlessly dodges all his attacks. Akiyama mentions that Sen has won 39 Kengan matches and 15 losses, as his cumulative Kengan record. Hatsumi then claims that he has overslept 9 times and skipped out 4 times and forgot about the fight the 2 others times, thus his loses record. Ohma then takes the form that he took in his previous fight and which makes him possessed. He then attacks Hatsumi who dodges his attack and launches a kick, claiming that Ohma became fast, but not fast enough to reach him. After an exchange of hits, Hatsumi mentions that Ohma is able to distort the flow of power. He claims that Ohma is using the Nico style, though it appears that this style died in the first generation alongside his owner. Ohma then become more annoyed about him mentioning Nico, and grab his neck, with Hatsumi claiming that he has struck a nerve by bringing up that subject, and Ohma should not get ahead of himself. As he tries to go serious, Nogi cuts in, saying that there is another way for Ohma to get into the tournament. He says that Yamashita could become a member of the association and register Ohma as his fighter. He then claims there are some members of the association who organize unofficial matches with their membership on the line with the purpose of making easy money. He gives Yamashita a loan of 100 million required to take part in those unofficial fight. Yamashita attempts to back out, but is persuaded by Ohma into accepting. Ohma will be facing Yokota in the unofficial match. He is the fighter of the CEO of Ushitami Food Services, who used to put his membership as a bait to make easy profit. Ohma defeats Yokota in a single punch, giving Yamashita the Kengan membership. His son, Kenzo, becomes aware of it, claiming that the path of his father and his will eventually cross. Masahiko, the president of Undermount Incorporated, is called by Kenzo, who appears to be the real leader of their corporation, and who has been acted from the shadow. He informs Masahiko they will be partaking in the tournament and they shall be hiring a fighter from the infamous Kure clan, which is a league of assassins that are notorious throughout the criminal underworld, just as the Zoldyck's family is in Hunter x Hunter. Later, Yamashita is having a drink with the man he met. He congratulates Yamashita for his membership and tells him that every member has been talking about the mysterious Yamashita Corporation who just joined the association. He introduces himself as Ken, the CEO of the famous Jainakuniya bookstore, and will also be participating in the tournament with his fighter Himuro Ryo. Ohma, now fully recovered and trained, reminisces to the time where Tokita Nico, his master and adoptive father, was killed by a man named Taira Genzan. Suddenly, Genzan's apprentice, Kiryu Setsuna, appears above Ohma, saying that he himself killed Genzan and that Ohma should take his revenge out on him instead. Ohma rebukes him, calling him a pervert and saying that he only sought Genzan to prove he was better than Nico, and that crushing Kiryu in the tournament will do just as well, which excites Kiryu. When left alone, Ohma went full psycho and claims that he will destroy him. At his home, Yamashita left spending money to his son Kenzo, from who he ignores anything and talks to him through his door, saying he is leaving for a 10-day business trip. Arriving at the boat that is supposed to take them to the island where the tournament will be held, Yamashita and many others business owners are sent to a creepy boat. It is revealed to them that a preliminary battle royal would be held there to decide who will be entering into the main tournament. However, when Kaede, the secretary of Nogi, brings Ohma some water, she becomes trapped in the battle royale area. She insists that he defend her until the end of the preliminaries, insisting it's his fault if she is trapped there. Ohma easily brings down some of the contestants who decided to team up to take him down, knowing he can be a danger in the tournament. Apparently Rihito is also on the boat and will also be taking part to the tournament under his own name. Rihito has improved his razor's edge, easily dispatching a fighter along the way without having to build up momentum. When he notices Kaede, he asks her if she has a boyfriend. Although Rihito wants revenge from their last fight, he instead decides to fight with Ohma so that they can both make it to the main tournament and fight each other there. Together they both defend Kaede and successfully stave off the horde of contenders. Their attention is drawn to Jerry Tyson, however, as he charges his way through contenders. Having learned to imitate weaponry, the Detroit native fighter rushes along at high speeds and knocks them aside, although Ohma continuously dodges his rushes. Ohma eventually redirects Jerry into a wall, but he just pushes off of it to return faster. However, this places him in trajectory to hit Kaede, and so he tries to stop himself. Before impact, Ohma uses a Nico-style technique called Indestructible. He actually learned that technique from his master Nico and used it to deflect Jerry away. Jerry attacks again, and again Ohma blocks him with Indestructible, sending him sprawling to the ground in defeat. Meanwhile, Sawada intimidates Rihito until it is revealed that there are only 5 contenders left just after 15 minutes, all of which to go on to the next stage of the tournament. Beyond Sawada and Rihito, Ohma, Karo Yoshinari, and Hasad also move on. Afterwards, Yamashita is distraught that he didn't make a bet, as all the people he thought would win actually end up winning, and he could have paid off his debt. From the main ship, Kiryu Setsuna watches in glee from his binoculars, is glad that Ohma has survived so that they can fight each other. Kataara Metsudo then welcomes the 5 victors to the main tournament, although he inadvertently insults Hasad, who demands to know why they were the only one placed in preliminaries. Angered at being called a mere piece on a board, Hasad tries to attack Kataara but is kicked and launched off of the ship in an instant by one of the president's special bodyguard. It is claimed that the first-rank fighter in the Kengan Association, the 5th Fang of Metsudo, belongs to this private army, and will be representing Metsudo in the tournament. Finally arriving on the luxury cruise ship, Yamashita is bittersweet over his childhood dream of attending such a fancy event due to the sheer amount of debt he incurred to get there. Nogi arrives with Hatsumi to congratulate Ohma on his victory, but Ohma rebuffs Nogi, saying he doesn't need him anymore, as he earned his own way into the tournament. At the same time, Rihito is seen harassing Akiyama Kaede for her phone number, who struggles to dissuade Rihito and tells him to go back to his employer. To what he replies that he is entering the tournament under his own name, being at the same time CEO and fighter. At this point it is revealed that Nogi, just like other companies, set up several subsidiary corporations much like Yamashita and Rihito, in which contracts, there are requirements that, if their fighter win the Kengan Annihilation tournament, that company will be required to select Nogi as the new Kengan Association chairman. As Yamashita walks around, he notices several people huddled around Kaneda Suikichi, a shogi player gambling. Ken asks Yamashita to try, as he also lost to Kaneda. Yamashita ends up losing 5 times in a row. The president of the association then arrives. He announces that in 27 hours they shall arrive at the battlefield and commence the fighters' registration, officially entering them into the tournament. However, by rule, no existing competitors may fight each other on the cruise ship. Shion talks with Nogi regarding the rule. They both agree that there are many ambitious people on board who may take advantage of Katara's words. When Ohma notices their conversation, she heads over to him. She mentions to him that her fighter Kiryu Setsuna has a keen interest in him. Ohma grabs her collar to demand to know where Kiryu is. She takes the assertiveness as flattery until Rihito pulls Ohma off of her. She tells Ohma to be thoroughly prepared if he wants to defeat Kiryu. Kiryu, meanwhile, is currently brutalizing Yoto merely because earlier he caused some of Hasad's blood to spatter on Ohma when he kicked him. In an ornate hallway on the boat, Kaneda Suikichi asks Ken to replace Himuro with him as the representant fighter for his company. Citing a loophole in the president's rule against competitors fighting, as a non-competitor, Kaneda can fight the competitors for the position, thus becoming a competitor only after the fight is over, and therefore not breaking the rule. Himuro accepts the challenge, and although Kaneda makes polite reassurances of fair play, Himuro quickly punches him in the face mid-speech, offering to abrogate his position only if Kaneda can withstand 1 minute. The fight begins in earnest with Kaneda trying to analyze the fight, but is again punched in the face while thinking. Kaneda staves him off long enough to identify Himuro's specific Jeet fighting form, and knowing how to anticipate, has more success blocking his attacks until Himuro wears him down and knees him in the stomach. Kaneda collapses, seemingly defeated, until he pops back up and lands a blow on Himuro. Himuro rushes back in, but Kaneda blocks enough of his attacks until taking an opening to hit him yet again, sending him to his knees. Himuro rises and again goes in, now taking Kaneda completely seriously, and begins to regain the advantage. Just as he lands the final blow, Kaneda manages to get his arm into a lock and uses his momentum to twist and break his arm. Himuro doesn't quit however, and begins to fight one-handed, but Kaneda quickly blocks each strike and then kicks him in his broken arm. Kaneda dodges a kick from Himuro, and Ken realizes that Kaneda is literally predicting Himuro's every move and beginning his dodges before they even begin, just as he did in shogi. Himuro refuses to give up despite Kaneda's taunts to back down, and in one final rush from Himuro, Kaneda slips around him and sends his head smashing to the ground. Meekly, Himuro tries to reach out, but Kaneda finishes him with a numerous stomping kicks to the face until he passes out. Ken, although shocked at how far Kaneda went, is nonetheless pleased to make Kaneda his new competitor. On an outside deck, Rihito shares a concern with Ohma that other non-competitors could abuse the loophole by attacking them at random, although Ohma is unconcerned. Wakatsuki and Cosmo however, talking in an engine room, are indeed targeted by unscrupulous non-competitors who seek to take their spots as fighters. Cosmo however is joyful at the challenge, having been bored all this time, and prepares to fight. The part 2 will be soon available on the channel. So subscribe and turn on the bell to be notified when released. Hope you'll enjoy, until next time.